Hey, what's up, y'all? It's another episode of Film Streak. My name is Rob. I'm here to talk about some new movies. And if you haven't heard the podcast before, maybe you're just checking this out. Thanks for listening for a minute. You can always check out other episodes at filmstreak.com. You can see what's going on there. But this episode, I want to get into a few films that I thought were interestingly tied together because, they're kind of all revolving around the idea of this sort of, I don't know, hostage, terrorist sort of negotiation situation type thing, right? And not all of them are entirely that, but the films here that I'm looking at, September 5th, 22 July, 6 Days, and most recently a pretty new release, iHostage. They kind of revolve around a similar thing. Now, the one that kind of stands out a little bit is 22nd July or 22 July. It's based on a true event. It's based on an act of terrorism. It's not quite like a hostage type situation, but it does give us a different point of view in this type of story. You know, this is a film by Paul Greengrass, who notably, I think, directed one of the most effective and really kind of chilling and heartbreaking movies about 9/11, United 93. And so here he directs this film that is not only about this terrorist attack in Norway carried out by one man, and it depicts the events of that day in a pretty horrific fashion, but it also lets us see more of the aftermath, you know, like in terms of the people who survived this and even the sort of fallout in that part of the world, in that country, in that society, with the man who did this, who went on trial, and the way that, you know, that justice system worked either for or against him, and how these people, the victims of this, just the people involved at the time, how they had to really come to terms with this act. The film itself, I think it's kind of nerve-wracking. The first, let's say the first third of the movie, the first act, which is the actual attack that this one man carries out on this, it's kind of like a camp of like a youth camp. And, you know, I think whether you remember the event as it happened in the news or happened in the time, what's strange in a way is that his sort of motivations, his reasoning, and his ideals as he carried out this attack, they're still relevant today. They might even be more relevant today in a strange way. This is something that has not really gone away. This has not been resolved. You know, the original attack, as it happened, I think it was in 2011. So at this point, we're talking 14 years ago. And you would think some things have changed in the world, and some things have changed in terms of either political ideologies or cultural ideologies, but not really. As a matter of fact, some things probably have gone even further in the wrong direction. And so it's really interesting to see not only the way this happened, but the sort of motivations for it and why this became such a really just a wrenching story to live through, but also just to watch in the film. Notwithstanding the whole real life aspect of this, I mean, it's hard to kind of sit through, but it did make me think about some of the films and stories that we tell about these really horrific events and how we look at the trauma that's caused by them, you know, the people that are left behind. And the thing that always fascinated me, I guess, and maybe fascinated is not the right word, but it just made me ask the question of like, well, what happens to the people that are left behind, whether they're victims of the actual attack itself or they're the people around victims who were taken from us, right? Like those people, those lives that have been changed forever, how do those people go on? I can't imagine the effect that that has on someone. And this film really digs into that in a really powerful way. So I thought it was really effective and really well done. And it doesn't really tell us how to feel about the man who did this and his reasons why. It just lays them out there, even though it's pretty clearly it's obvious to anybody watching and who has I don't know, a reasonable sense of decency or humanity to see like this person was a monster. And but this does remind me, it's like I did see a documentary and it was about the Oklahoma City bombing, which actually not too long after or before I'm recording this, it's been 30 years since, right? It was it April 19th, 20, no, April 19th, 1995. So yeah, we're a little after that now, but I mean, it's been 30 years since that happened. And that documentary that I saw, you could probably find it. I think it's on Max, and it does kind of dig into the event itself, but also the manhunt and then the trial, and not only the cultural change that came of it, but the cultural reasons that it happened in the first place, right? Like the fact that it was on the anniversary of Waco, it was on the heels of people really feeling like they can't trust the government and that the government is actually evil in some way. And the need for blood, the need for vengeance, all that sort of thing. And it led me into another film called The Order, which I just saw. And that one's pretty recent too. That's got Jude Law and Nicholas Hoult. And who else is in that? Ty Sheridan's in that. Journey Smollett. Who else? It's a pretty solid cast, but I think the bigger thing about that film is it is about another real life story of this sort of brewing tension and hostility towards law enforcement, towards the government, by these forces of either, you could call them racist militant groups that are out in the country. And I think that story took place in Colorado, but I know so many different parts of the country that this sentiment was brewing of like the government's wrong and our country's being taken away from us and we got to do something about it. And, that's a hard thing to take. And I don't know that these films are necessarily meant to be about that as much as they are about like finding the people who are morally on the wrong side of things, even though they might feel like they're right, even though there might be some things that you could see your way to agreeing to. I don't know. But the idea to me was that these films are about finding a way to identify and, if possible, stop these acts, these, these moments of violence and brutality and apathy, and to find a way clear and to learn something about ourselves and why are we like this and why is the world like this. So anyway, that's a couple of films that I thought they were interesting in the sense like it gives us a little bit more of a peek into the reasons why, like why somebody does something like this, or why a group of people feel the way they feel and decide to take actions that are so horrifying. And so the other three films here that I mentioned, September 5 or September 5th, and 6 Days, and iHostage, these are a little more of a group. September 5th is about the coverage by ABC Sports during the 1972 Olympics and the incident that happened there where the terrorist kidnapped or held captive the members of the Israeli Olympic team. and the whole incident that went down. And now there are other films that have gone into this specifically from that point of view, most notably Munich from Steven Spielberg. But there are other films, there are other documentaries about these events that happen. This one I thought was interesting because it's not necessarily about that, although that is kind of what drives the plot of this film. September 5th is actually about the newsroom. It's about the sports news team and their place at being at the Olympics to cover this every 4 years, this event, and cover it in a new way on television, live, broadcast by satellite. And yet they're on the other side of the world. And so how do you make the right choices on what things you should do, what things you should show, what information, how do you disperse this information to the world? Because the whole world is watching. We're talking 1972. This is not the time we live in today where everybody kind of can see anything at any moment. At that point in time, it really was like all eyes were kind of focused on the same thing. And so it's just an unbelievable amount of pressure, I'm sure. And this film tries to give us that and show us like the decisions that had to be made in real time and the consequences of some of those decisions, good or bad. And the other thing I thought was interesting is it gives us a peek into the real kind of analog process of television, the way it was filmed, the way it was produced, the way it was programmed, the way it was broadcast. So many different elements that I'm sure there might be some holdovers in current, in TV today, the way it actually works. But I feel like a lot of this is kind of gone. Technology has changed so much of how TV and broadcasting works, even to the point where like doing a podcast like this wasn't possible back then, or at least not in this way. So I thought it was a really interesting glimpse back at that point in time specifically. The technology, the people, the sort of the process that you had to go through to actually like develop film and have it ready to go on air, right? It was a really neat kind of way to look at that. And yet you've got the clock ticking on the whole thing because this is a really tense and high stakes situation. So that was a really good film. I'm surprised it didn't seem to get more kind of, I don't know, notice or just so much about it, I think is kind of deceptively really really well done. Because the idea of this kind of lo-fi look and approach to telling this story, even to the cinematography and some of the camera work, it feels very much like a film out of 1972. And I think it's not as easy as you might think to kind of pull that off today. So I enjoyed that one. I thought it told an important story, but it also told it in a really different way with a kind of a fresh angle. And so on the heels of that, I saw 6 Days, which is about a similar thing. It's about terrorists who kind of hold up in the Iranian embassy in London. And part of it is about the unit that has to kind of go in and diffuse this situation. But yet there is the negotiation aspect of it where they're at bay, just waiting on the side for the go. Meanwhile, there's the back and forth between the demands and what do we do? What can we do? Do we not let these people go? The political kind of oversight from the British government at the time. But also you've got a reporter here who is covering the story live, and we're seeing the real kind of, I guess, the public news angle of it. Like we're getting a sense of like how tenuous the whole situation is from day to day, from all 6 days, right? So I thought that was a really interesting, similar take on this kind of thing where if you don't know how it turns out, you kind of are just kind of on the edge of your seat wondering, how's this going to work? Like, what are we actually going to see as the result? How's this going to end on television, live? So it made for a pretty interesting, somewhat suspenseful story. You know, I got to say, I feel like it's a film I must have seen before. It looked sort of familiar, like the story of it, but I don't know. I thought it was pretty well done. And so the last film that I'll talk about here, it's maybe a little similar. It's iHostage, and that was one that honestly, when I saw it pop up on Netflix, and I really thought just from the title alone, I'm like, is this some kind of corny reality thing? I mean, the title itself, I Hostage, is so kind of cornball. I just really didn't think this was a real thing until I looked at the trailer and read the description. Like, oh, this is based on a true story. And then this actually this is how this went down. Didn't know that. Didn't know this happened. But watching this film, I got to say, it tries to give us not quite in real time, but gives us the progression of events of this incident that happened. The gunman, he walks into an Apple store in Amsterdam and takes some people hostage. Really, by this film, at least it's one man. He takes one man hostage. He doesn't realize other people in the store, some of them get out, some of them are hiding. But it is more contemporary because this is in an Apple store. And this is clearly a story that takes place today. And with the different approach to an active shooter, to a terrorist or a hostage situation, we see the law enforcement reaction to it, their sort of ways of maneuvering and preparing for taking action. And so it feels a little more like modern. It feels more slickly produced. You know, it feels a little more like an episode of 24 or something, even though that's kind of outdated by now. But that's the idea, right? It feels more modern. And, ultimately, though, I got to say, like, it doesn't really hold up so well. I think the conceit of it, the premise, is kind of interesting, to think like, oh, well, we've seen this in previous times, in previous eras, in different locations. But this, it seems the juxtaposition of the Apple store, which is this really kind of modern, futuristic, I think a little bit of a haven for people. If you're in a shopping center or you're just in an Apple store, it feels like you're a little bit removed from reality sometimes. And to think like, oh, that's a place where everybody's life can be in danger in an instant. That's really compelling to me. I'm interested. But the film here and some of the filmmaking and some of the acting, I feel like it doesn't quite match. It doesn't quite meet it. If I had money on it, I would almost think this might get remade somehow. Or a very similar kind of film might be made about a very similar kind of event. So I don't know. That's just a few of the films I've seen recently. No real big takeaways, I guess. That's it for this episode. I'm going to keep it short. I'm going to just get out your hair real quick. In the meantime, you go to filmstreak.com. You can find other episodes. You can subscribe to get these by email. If you're a new subscriber, you're checking this out, thank you. I hope you kind of stick around. Listen to some more episodes if you want. If you want to find out where all these films are, where to watch them, where to get tickets or whatever, I also have a list to all these films on IMDb. So you can go there and add them to your list if you do IMDb. I have Letterboxd, but it's really kind of outdated. I don't really rock with that too much. But hey, look, if Letterboxd is a thing and I'm missing it, let me know. Tell me what's up. Until then, you know what it is. You know what to do. Go watch something new.